Welcome to All Things Moore County, Moore County's weekly radio show highlighting the many facets of the Sandhills. That includes real estate, lifestyle, community and neighborhoods. And now from 4 Properties, here's your host, Bill Sahadi.
Good morning and welcome to the talk show, All Things Moore County. Dorothy, we are in our first full week for all schools in Moore County, where now the kids are off.
Yep.
I think the parents are like saying, my vacation is over. The teachers are saying, thank God, we have a couple of weeks off. But in truth, all the schools in Moore County are probably right back at it very hard, preparing for August.
Oh, yeah.
It's a 12-month endeavor, and I have many moms who work in my office, and they are like, oh, my gosh, now summer vacation is here. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
So, you know, in the last, forget the fact we've been doing the show for 14 years. In the last 10 years, the growth in Moore County, the explosion of people, the demographic changes, it's kind of been like a ping pong balls in a windstorm.
I can agree with that.
It's beyond anything. The growth is beyond anything I think any of us could have imagined in 2013.
Yeah.
And in the last 10 years, we've had the privilege of having different representatives from the Sandhills Classical Christian School on the show, from the head of schools to teachers, parents, and education is become priority number one in Moore County as we, from our real estate side, are bringing in and introducing young families who are moving to Moore County to discuss all the options that the different schools offer. Today we're pleased to have Jean Liechty, who is the Director of Advancement for the Sandhills Classical Christian School, and Amita Sherwood, who was actually on the show maybe 4 or 5 years ago. She's the chairman of the board of the Sandhills Classical Christian School. She has 2 daughters, ages 13 and 11, who have been involved in the school, I guess, since kindergarten and preschool, about 8 years running, 13 and 11. So you gave your hands full.
That's correct, yes.
When you were on a couple of years ago, you came on as a parent, and you spoke about your experience through your daughter's eyes about the school. And today you come in wearing maybe a different hat than you did then.
I would say I always wear both hats, but certainly since the first time I was on, I've had the pleasure of serving our school in the role on our board.
Yeah. You moved here about 9-10 years ago?
We did. Our family moved here in 2015.
Tell me how you got introduced to this school and how that all started.
Well, it was absolutely a divine story. So in 2013, we had the opportunity to come to this area. My husband worked with the military, and we planned to be in this area at that time. And we're searching for school options in Moore County, and particularly we're keen on looking for private schools at that time, even though our children were 3 and 1. And so we happened to visit Sandhills Classical Christian School when we were at another location in a much different time and environment. And we just were floored at the environment, not only of the person who toured us, but the young children, even preschool children, and how they engaged with us as adults. And it was something that just stuck with us. We had never heard of classical Christian education, but we knew it was something we had to learn more about. So we did some research. We found that there's a National Association of Classical Christian Schools, and learned that there are these types of schools all over our country, if not as well as internationally. So immediately we thought there must be something in the DC metro area, which is where we lived at the time. We searched, we found something. We did enroll our older daughter for preschool there. And within that first year, just what happened in not only her life, but in our lives was amazing. And we knew that this was the environment that we needed to continue to stay in for both of our children. And then we did not move in 2013. We ended up coming here in 2015. So we already knew about Sandhills Classical Christian School and knew that this was where we wanted to go. And thankfully, they had room for both of our children at that time. And we've never thought of any other option since then.
Yeah, the conversation about school choices for families moving into the area has become very diverse. We get a lot, even before we meet the families. They're online. They're doing a lot of research. They're looking at public school, private school options, some homeschool options, and they're asking a lot of questions. And every year the demographics continue to shift. So we always have a new wave of families, young families coming into town. What do people, big picture, what do people need to understand about the differences between the Sandhills Classical Christian School and other private school offerings in Moore County?
Great question. I think there's a few things. The first thing that probably sticks out is just our methodology and our approach in terms of academic teaching. We follow the classical methodology, which is what our founding fathers were educated in, focusing on the liberal arts, and particularly with the approach of what's called the trivium, which are 3 stages of learning and development. There's the grammar stage, which is typically K through 5 or K through 6. There's the logic or dialectic stage, which is about 6 through 8, and then there's rhetoric, which is 9 through 12. And what's really important is that children are taught depending on the stage of development that they are naturally in. So when they're younger, there's a lot of chants and repeating and songs and rhymes to learn basic and fundamental, math and science and grammar and things of that nature.
That's right. Jingles, sound offs. It's noisy in the K to 5 hallway. The kids are actively learning, very tactile learning with your hands, and their minds in that stage, as Amita knows, and I've had 4 kids that have been trained up in classical Christian. You've got your 2 beautiful daughters, but their minds are like sponges. Right. And so we fill their minds with lots of facts, even though they don't understand how some of these facts are interrelated or even how to use things. You might memorize the periodic table of elements. You won't use it until you get into chemistry, but by that time, you know all the symbols, right?
Right.
In first grade, you're going to learn to diagram a sentence, nouns and verbs and adjectives and adverbs and prepositions and objects of prepositions. You go into a first grade classroom and you put a sentence on the board that has 8 or 10 words in first grade, and they will together rhyme and chant and give you every single part of speech for every word that's in that sentence. And they're having fun doing it. It blows people's minds, quite honestly. And I just hijacked the conversation. So back to grammar and logic and rhetoric. But yeah, that's grammar.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I think sticks out is you see that they're enjoying learning, right? They're fully engaged, as Jean said. There's tactile. It's a really full kind of experience for the kids. As they get into that logic stage, which is actually where my 2 girls are at this time, we all know they love to ask why and question and push, right? And challenge. And so we take advantage of that. And we teach them about how do you really ask questions to learn? So that things like the Socratic method, right? And Socratic inquiry. We teach them formal logic. What I love is that, we just finished a school year where she's now going to be 8th grade, but she just learned 28 fallacies and the formalities behind how information will be presented in ways that she can be able to pick apart. And that's something that, reading through, working with her this past year, it was just wonderful to see that someone of her age is learning how to find truth in information being presented to her. And then as they get into that rhetoric stage, they continue to advance their ability to think, to articulate, articulate their points, their views, their ideas gracefully, and stand firm, right, in their beliefs and those ideas, and really use evidence-based approaches, right, to come to those ideas and thoughts. So I think of that, the trivium, the way we've explained it to people, whether it's friends, other parents, it's like a house, right? Your grammar is your foundation. The logic is the walls that have to keep, everything together. But the rhetoric is the roof. You really can't have a full house without all three pieces.
Right. It sounds to me like as the children grow, there's a natural integration of the learning process so that you get to the point when they're maybe in middle school or high school age where they achieve critical thinking, which is the antithesis of memorizing. And I grew up in a public school where they didn't teach you to the test, but you wanted to get the answers right. And that's not what you guys are all about. Yes, you want them to get from here to there, but the process is completely different.
That's right. What we really want to do ultimately is graduate lifelong learners.
Right.
And kids who know how to articulate with the tongue and the pen, and to be able to do it winsomely, so that when they graduate, when they walk across our stage and they get that diploma and they leave the school, whether they stay in this community or whether they go off to college somewhere else or whether they get invested in the trades or whatever they do, that they make an impact where they go. And that honestly, they make an impact for Christ. So we're our DNA, I like to say this, our DNA is in our name. And we've been talking about classical. We're Sandhills Classical Christian School. But I'd argue that the bigger C is the Christian part of it. I think most of the families come to us, at least initially, because we're a Christian school in Moore County. Mm-hmm. They're not even sure what the classical is, although it's hard to argue with the results. But they don't know how you get there. They've engaged some of our graduates. If you're wise, you're going to look at the product, and the product becomes full-orbed when they're juniors and seniors, and they've got to give their thesis and present it and defend it in front of a panel. That's what our students have to do. They get a trial run their junior year, and by their senior year, I know my kids who were graduating out of a classical Christian school up in Cary Christian School, there'd be up to 200, 250 people watching these 60 students and the panel of 3 judges go after them after they give a 10-minute presentation, which is based on a written paper that they've been working on. But this is the culmination of logic, like you were talking about, Amita, that you get in 8th grade in middle school, and everything you've learned. So it's quite a thing. I haven't seen, outside of classical Christian, I haven't seen the rigor that produces this type of a result anywhere. Other schools are doing a fine job of educating kids, and it's amazing for such a small county. We've been talking about the growth. Yep. I remember, 6 months ago, I read in the pilot, it was on the front page, that we'd hit 100,000 people. It was just though in the last year that Moore County reached 100,000. I'm coming out of a community of 1.1 million, Wake County, right? Because my experience has been more up in the Raleigh area. But it's amazing the number of schools and the number of options that exist here in this small community with what I guess we call villages, right? It's the village of Pinehurst and the village of Whispering Pines. But it's remarkable.
My observation of students at the school over the years, and I've known quite a few of them, their eye contact is off the charts. Their verbal skills and their courtesies are very self-evident. And it's almost as if they are getting, and maybe this is the wrong term, much more in-your-face teaching as opposed to having the ability to kind of hide out. It's one-on-one, even in a classroom, and the kids develop courage and they develop self-esteem as they go.
Well, you give your very first presentation.
Yeah.
You have to get over the stage fright. In second grade,
Right.
you learn about timelines. And the timeline you're actually studying is the Egyptian timeline. You start learning about the rise and fall of empires. So it's Egypt, and then it's Rome. What caused it to rise? What were the chinks in the armor? What were their downfalls? And so you study these things. But one of the things you do in second grade, in addition to studying a timeline, which is on a wall above the chalkboard, is you have to get up and you have to present your own timeline. I was born here. We got our first pet here. Mommy came home with a new baby, when I was 4. And it's got pictures, and they stand up without notes, and they engage the classroom, and then they take questions.
Right.
That's in second grade. By the time you get to be a junior,
Right.
you're so used to presenting on the founding fathers or
Right.
anything else that I guess you never quite get over stage fright. I've been pastoring for 20 years, and I get up in front of audiences. I will next week in Dallas and in Pittsburgh. You never quite get over it, but there's a healthy nervousness that you know this too, Amita, because you stand in front of groups, and Bill, you do as well.
Yes.
It can't be paralyzing, but it's
When you, I know adults today who have stage fright, who are working, and when I have kids who come on the show from different schools, from the arts or whatever, I always tell them, because they say I'm nervous, or if they're coming on the radio show, I'm nervous. I said, well, let me tell you something about being nervous. If you're nervous, you are thinking about yourself. You are not thinking about who you're speaking to. You're wrapped up in yourself. And I watch some of the kids, and they go, huh. And it sort of gives them an ability to separate from themselves so they can project. But nervousness is all about selfishness. And it's normal as you grow and you get out of it, and it does help kids lighten up a little bit and be able to make that delivery, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you are right.
We want to come back in the second set. There's a lot to unwrap today. We want to talk about the growth, what's been happening the last 5, 6, 7 years. I want to talk to you also about one of the things parents reach out to us about all the time are test scores. When they're looking for schools, and if they haven't been here, they only want to go by numbers, and that does not, and I try to tell them that's not the whole story. Want to know how you all deal with that. Our conversation today is with the Sandhills Classical Christian School. Jean Liechty and Amita Sherwood are our guests. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our second set of All Things Moore County, speaking all about the Sandhills Classical Christian School and their expanding footprint in Moore County, especially over the last 8 to 10 years. I mean, it's been ridiculous. We want to talk about some of your expansion. Before we do, I ended the first set with a question. We get phone calls all the time from parents who are coming from out of state. They want test scores. They want to know that their child is going to go to the highest rated school. And how does that mesh with what you present? And we're talking about college enrollment percent, statistics and this and that. How do you handle all that?
Yeah, people want a bang for their buck.
Yep.
They're paying tuition dollars. And,
Right.
Testing's interesting right now. You have the SAT, and then more recently the ACT, and now with classical Christian schools and other schools that are similar to ours, you have the CLT, because the SAT and the ACT can't get after some of what we do with great books. And, you have a year of American lit, a year of British literature, you have the great books, you have classical literature, And so it doesn't test the breadth of all that we're teaching. I do know this, in our grammar school, the kids are testing 2 years up. So your average first grader is testing like a third grader on a national scale.
Mm-hmm.
When you get to high school, when you get to the logic and rhetoric stage, 6th to 12th grade, it's a little more difficult to capture it all, like I was saying, with the SAT and the ACT. But I do know, having graduated 4 kids out of classical Christian schools and into college, well, 3 of the 4 into college, that they weight our transcripts differently. So if you're a 3.0 average graduate out of a classical Christian school, they look at the transcript as an honors transcript. They see that you've had logic and you've had 6 years of Latin and you've had your Spanish and all these other requirements. Everybody has those classes. They weight it differently. So a 3.0 is actually a 4.0, or a 4.0 is a 5.0. And so between that and the interview that you do, you had mentioned earlier the ability for kids to shake a hand, to look you in the eye, to render some honor where honor and respect are due.
Right.
It shouldn't be the case, but that alone makes you stand out today in a way that 40 years ago, that was just expected of everybody. And so it's a different world. Our community looks and smells a little different. We work really hard on culture. My job isn't to decide what we're going to teach. I'm not an academic dean. Actually, I just build stuff. I'm trying to accommodate the growth and the demand in Moore County, which is a very full-time job.
Right.
But the other thing that I speak into, because I'm passionate about it, is a culture that's different. When you walk down the hallway and you see these children, I don't care whether it's a 3rd or a 5th or an 8th grade boy or girl, it's hello, Mr. Liechty, good day, Mr. Liechty, how are you, Mr. Liechty? And they're looking you in the eye. And when I walk up to a young man and extend my hand, he knows what to do with it. He's not fist bumping me. Yeah. He actually wants to, well, some do, but most of them want to shake it. So it's a lot more than, education at its best is formative. It actually transforms heart and mind. That's what good education ought to do. And we're not satisfied with just the mind. We want the heart as well. That's part of being gospel-centered. That's part of our mission. And that's really why when people come in, you come visit us, you walk into a classroom, you see what 1st graders and 5th graders and 8th graders are doing, there's about a 95% chance you're going to apply to our school, and you're never going to be able to unsee what you saw. Yeah. You won't. So I don't know what all the other schools are doing. I don't ever come on a show and talk about what anybody else is doing. I just know what we're doing, and I know the response we get.
Right. And I would just add, Bill, you asked earlier about what makes us different, right? What's distinct or different. And really, in addition to, yes, there are objective test scores that, consistently kids are 2 to 4 grades, above where they really, where they actually are. But to Jean's point, you really, what you see is even more impactful, right? Just, and that one difference I would say with our school is we want you to come visit, right? We want you to come see what your child is doing in the classroom. We want you to be engaged in your child's education, right? It is not your child is here and what we do with them, is kind of our business. And then when they come back to you, that's your business. It's not that way. Yeah. It's a partnership. And so to Jean's point, when you visit, that's why I've encouraged several families, we've had several families on our street who've actually come to our school after they moved on our street, probably, hopefully I would like to think, spent some time with our children, asked us about our school. And I love talking about our school. It's something that brings joy to me, but I always encourage, just go visit, go walk in those school buildings, and you will see the product and you will see the result that doesn't show up on a test score.
That's right. It's so funny that you mentioned that word of mouth today. And I'm a marketing guy. And so this kind of drives me crazy because I have all these strategies, for how to reach folks. Word of mouth,
Is
an enthusiastic parent,
Mm-hmm.
even today,
Mm-hmm.
21st century,
Yeah.
it is the number one way in which people find out about us. And it's the way it should be. You want enthusiastic parents. You want people who are excited about, and students excited about the education that they're receiving and talking it up at church and at your office and in the marketplace, just out in town.
When I graduated college in 1975, my annual tuition was $4,000. I happened to meet with a gentleman that I know here locally who went to his niece's high school graduation, and she's attending the same school I went to up in Pennsylvania. Tuition is $70,000 a year. Okay, so the reason I bring that up is because there's a lot of talk. Our job market is changing so much. People have to be able to pivot. They have to be able to accommodate change. We don't even know in 10 years what the jobs are going to be after a college education. What are students being trained for? And what about the students who don't go to college? Job training. We have guests on this show many times. We sit here, peers of mine, and we laugh with each other. We say, God, we never learned that in high school. We never learned about thinking outside the box, fundraising. They didn't have a class in that. They only had the standardized classes as a formal education. And then you go out into the world and good luck. You have to have the ability to assimilate and learn. But a lot of parents have job training on their mind. What if their kid is not going to be going to college? Or even if they are, how do you prepare kids for this changing world that we're in?
What's interesting, I and someone who you may know,
Yep.
Lee Bortons,
Yep.
who started Classical Conversations right here in the Sandhills and
Yes.
now has 130,000 K-12 students across this country that meet once a week. It's a form of homeschool.
Right.
If she's listening, and Lee, I butcher this, please forgive me. I'm trying to describe what you do here. But she started actually, and I kind of jumped on and partnered with her with guests, but a podcast called Markers and Milestones, and a website's coming that'll help direct people, and here's how it's connected to what you said, to the best universities or the best technical training schools in the country for kids that are graduating with an excellent education. You've got a K-12 education in classical Christian. You already know how to think critically.
Right.
You've already read more important books, the great books, across the centuries than your parents have. Not everybody needs to do 4 more years of college. It depends on what you want to do and how you want to function in society. But we need more electricians. We need more plumbers. And so what Markers and Milestones is going to be doing is going to be helping parents and students, grades 9 to 12, figure out best options. What are the best colleges out there, best liberal arts colleges that aren't as progressive and aren't indoctrinating kids in certain things anymore? What are the best technical training places across the country for you to go? There isn't enough of that. So discerning minds need to figure these things out, and we want to come alongside parents and assist that way. But not everybody, I'm a firm believer, not everybody is supposed to do another 4 years of school. I've got one son who entered the marketplace and is wonderfully successful in what he's doing, and I've got 2 in college and 1 that graduated and is capitalizing on the career she got. So our job is to really prepare these kids for whatever God has for them, to be the best that they can be, and to evaluate all of their experiences in light of Scripture, to be lovers of truth and beauty and goodness, and to be able to articulate, like I said earlier, with the tongue and the pen, that which they believe, and go out into that marketplace of ideas and really knock it out of the park, be able to hold their own.
Yeah. We're going to come back in the third set. Amita, I want to talk to you a little bit about your background and how your background meshes with what the school does for your girls, because you're a consultant. We're going to ask you to wear another hat for just a couple of minutes, okay?
Okay.
And we want to talk also about some of the expansion at Sandhills Classical Christian what's been going on. Your social media page has become more and more prominent. We see visions of classroom. You do show a lot more about the classrooms that you did a few years ago. It gives people a pretty good idea of what's going on inside the walls. This is All Things Moore County. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our final set of All Things Moore County. Gene Liechty is the Director of Advancement for the Sandhills Classical Christian School, and Amita Sherwood, the Chairman of the Board, who has two daughters in the school who have been there for 8 years. Amita, during the break, we were talking a little bit about some of the things we talked about in the second set, about getting students ready for the job market or ready for whatever comes after high school, be it college or more formal training. And you had a couple of very interesting observations. I'd love you to share.
Yes, yeah, I did. So something that I learned very early in my career. So my first job out of college was with GE in a leadership development program. And something that they told us very early on was, we hire for a certain profile. We can train you to do whatever it is we need you to do. And that has always stuck with me. And so it really is what we're doing at Sandhills Classical Christian School. Mm-hmm. We are developing our young people to think critically, to know their place in this world, to know that they're here to be in relation to other people, to serve others, to use their gifts and talents, to serve their communities, to serve the Lord, and to write, to articulate. Those are the foundations. Those are the profiles. They are lifelong learners. So they can be, vocationally trained and developed to do anything that they're gifted and talented to do, or that their future employers may ask them to do. Yeah. So that's something that really sticks out in terms of a classical Christian education. Is we're creating a young person who has this broad, foundation and really can be applied anywhere and to whatever vocation that they end up in.
Yeah, I grew up, in high school I was a basketball player, and I learned the word pivot. And I thought pivot only applied to basketball. And as I've gone through my life, pivot is something you do every other day. You have to be able to switch gears, accommodate, right? And we use that word a lot on the show. Go ahead, Gene. I was going to say, and this is connected to what Amita just shared, but with advancement, part of that is fundraising and awareness generally, the marketing side of things. And 4 years ago when I arrived here, we started these corporate sponsorships. And the first year we had 5, 6 corporate sponsors. This next year, in just 4 years, we'll have 40 local companies that support our school in a very tangible way. And people always ask, well, how is it that so many are interested in supporting you? And I said, well, there's some self-interest there. I said, they're looking to hire the very type of student that we graduate. I mean, they're thinking about the future of their company. Right. They need kids who know how to think on their feet and think creatively and do it outside the box on occasion. Problem solvers, right? You're looking for problem solvers and people who see the world a certain way and know how to engage it and are a little bit fearless and courageous, not arrogant. It can turn into that, right? But so there's so it makes my job easy because our product smells good, right? Yeah, right. So for what I do, I've got one of the easiest jobs in the world. I get to sell something that's already beautiful. Yeah, you do. And Amita, your training, your professional training, and what you do in your career, there's a consistency between what you do and what your girls are learning and how they're learning that you feel will give them an upper hand as they grow and move on into the world.
There is, yeah, absolutely. So So in my profession, what I tell people is I help create problem solvers. I help develop critical thinkers. And that's a skill set that never gets old, right? Whether you work in a, Fortune 500 type company, a government organization, a nonprofit, a healthcare organization, problems will always surface.
Mm-hmm.
You use the word pivot. There is always a need to pivot.
We all need to wear sneakers.
Right? And so, and critical thinking, to boil it down maybe simply, is really being able to see something complex and break it down into small and manageable parts.
Right.
Right. And then be able to address those small and manageable parts, to be able to then solve a larger problem.
Right.
So, we're setting that foundation from kindergarten onward. And again, for our children to see our complex world and be able to break it down into manageable parts and pieces. That is something that I, again, in my profession, have teach people, work with organizations to build their people up to be problem solvers, right? Instead of saying, as leaders or managers, I have to tell you how to solve this or to make this better. What we're asking of people in the workplace is, you do this every day. You know how to make it better. You know what's not working well. And here are the skills and tools you have now as a problem solver to make it better for yourself. But our children have that foundation even before they get to a workplace.
I bet you and your daughters have some of the most interesting conversations at dinner, where they will challenge you, they'll engage you, and you probably, they're 13 and 11, and it may be like three adults sitting at the table pontificating on the world.
I would say, there's a part of me that says I'd love to be able to say, yes, we have the most in-depth, high-level conversations at our dinner table. But you said you were a basketball player.
Yeah.
My children love basketball as well. We are a basketball family as well as a football family.
Yeah.
Many of our conversations are actually sports related, but the level of depth and detail that they understand and get into is probably quite different than two young ladies their age.
Well, that's right, and the ability to think at a different level. When you get to the logic and rhetoric stage, when you're in 6th to 12th grade, it's not enough in a novel to be able to identify the antagonist and the protagonist. We need to be talking about, was this character, were they virtuous, for instance, and according to whose definition, by whose standard. Mm-hmm. So it's a whole different level of engagement and different level of thinking that is expected.
Right.
But you train for that.
Right.
And it starts in kindergarten, right? You don't expect them to jump in. That's why it gets a little more difficult for kids to transition into our school. If they haven't had the foundation of K to 5, it's not impossible. Quite honestly, homeschoolers, the folks at EDS, they're doing a good job. They're a K to 5 school locally. Yep. They do a really good job. It's rigorous, the education that they receive. A lot of homeschoolers do a fantastic job. But depending on your experience in K to 5, coming in at 6th grade can be hard, which is why we do assessments on kids, not because we're trying to determine whether or not we're going to take them, as much as we're trying to figure out how to love them and come alongside them. What are your strengths, your weaknesses? What do you need to work on over the summer to be able to hit the ground running in the fall? I think we have right now that entry point, that 6th grade entry point is one of the, along with kindergarten, is one of the toughest ones at our school. I think we had last week 15 students on the waiting list for 6th grade alone. We can't build fast enough. Right. We honestly can't keep up with the demand in Moore County for the type of education that God has enabled us to be able to produce.
You talk about you can't build fast enough, and you were speaking, Amita, about your girls playing basketball. Your expansion has been part of, people have noticed it. You've got a new athletic center. You're creating, beyond the curriculum, more of a campus feeling for well-rounded students. Do you want to talk a little bit about the expansion that's been going on?
Sure. Yeah. Love to. That's sort of my lane. Yeah, over the last 6 years, we've put up 3 buildings, 2 academic buildings, and now a 31,000 square foot arts and athletics center that's, I think it's about the biggest gym in Moore County, that has a stage on one end with the light and sound system, because the arts are also important, but we've developed some athletic fields and sodded those. And this fall, we have 60 acres to develop.
Yes.
It's an embarrassment of riches in that.
Yes.
But this summer, our partner Retson, we work with Retson companies. They're incredible as a partner in Moore County. But we're going to be developing our quad, or our courtyard, which will have 4 outdoor classrooms and a fountain, and kind of tie the 3 buildings together. And then in the next 12 months, we have to break ground on a K-2 academic building, so we can go from having 600 pre-K to 12 to 800 pre-K to 12. And Bill, quite honestly, that won't meet the demand. It's just growing.
I mean, you have a waiting list right now.
Oh yeah, we have 80. We stopped taking names in some grades. We told people, we're really sorry, don't even apply, because if you're 12th or 14th. Now the grade, it'll vary by grade. We have some grades that have a waiting list of 1 or 2.
Right.
And with our transient area, with all the military, 25 to 30% of our families are special forces or involved somewhere in the Fort Bragg area.
That's right.
They're officers or something.
And now Fort Liberty. We're gonna have to start saying, people are saying Fort Bragg / Liberty. It's going to be Fort Liberty.
Oh, I got to get.
We all have to get on that bandwagon. Yeah.
So we're working hard right now, and again, the support of the community is tremendous. My job is to seek that out, and then work with the builders to get the facilities up, so we can educate and do what God's called us to do.
If people want to go online and look at your site, you do answer a lot of questions on your site. It's fairly intuitive. Where would they go?
Sandhillsccs.org.
Okay. We continue to grow in Moore County, and we are continuing to expand. And there are more children moving into Moore County than you can shake a stick at. And there are lots of choices for education, and parents are becoming, they are as vigilant today, and they are as conscientious as they can be on behalf of their children. People love to be in Moore County, and they want to make sure that they're going to raise their kids in the best environment they possibly can, and school is probably the biggest part of that. I appreciate you guys coming on and talking. It's always good to revisit and put a reminder out there of what all the things that Moore County offers, and Sandhills Classical Christian is right there at the front.
Thanks so much for having us on this morning.
Yeah, Gene, thank you. Amita,
thank you very much.
Thank you. And I enjoyed the conversation. I especially enjoyed some of the conversation in between the sets as well. You guys are great spokespeople. Sandhills Classical Christian School is located on Raysbridge Road in Whispering Pines. They have a 60-acre campus, not all fully developed yet, but room to grow. Wish you the best of luck. This is All Things Moore County. Have a great week. Thank you.